They saw me as a trespasser, but I held the deed in my hand. I had a box of Uncle Ray's vinyl records balanced on one hip, the key to my new front door clenched between my teeth, and a cautious kind of hope rolling through my chest. The gravel crunched under my boots as I stepped toward the porch. It was early morning, but the mountain air already smelled like pine and possibility. Then tires screeched. A blue and white SUV, Community Safety Patrol, stenciled on the side, tore up my driveway like I was staging a hostage crisis. Two people in matching windbreakers jumped out like they'd been waiting for this moment their whole lives. One raised a phone, filming. The other walked toward me fast, clipboard in hand, barking orders like a mall cop with delusions of grandeur. You can't be here. This property is under enforcement. I spit the key into my palm and blinked at them. It's my house. They didn't flinch. You're not on the occupancy roster. Vacate or we call the police. I smiled. Call them. Bring snacks. That was the first 30 seconds of my new life in the mountains, and it was already unraveling. The house was a slice of heaven carved into the ridge. 2 stories of cedar siding, a wraparound deck that caught the sunset just right, and a view so perfect it looked like a desktop wallpaper. My Uncle Ray had left it to me because, as he said more than once, I was the only one who showed up when the roof leaked. He passed in February. Probate wrapped by June. I had the stamped deed, the trust documents, the county filings, everything. Legal. Locked in. Mine. Apparently that didn't matter to the Maple Ridge Summit HOA. I gently set the vinyls on the porch, dug into my bag, and produced the file folder I had carried like armor since the will was finalized. I handed them the deed, the letters, the trust transfer order. Windbreaker number 1 glanced at them the way you might glance at a flyer for lost cats. She sneered. The association requires pre-occupancy approval and proof of residency continuity. I blinked. Continuity? The previous owner was evicted last fall for assessment delinquency. Therefore, no one can reoccupy the property until the board votes. I froze. Evicted? My uncle? Ray had spreadsheets for his spreadsheets. He was obsessive, annoyingly so, about paying bills early, especially the HOA dues. He didn't trust online portals, called them fishing traps made by raccoons. I'd driven him to the HOA office myself to hand-deliver his check during chemo week. He didn't miss a payment. He didn't miss anything. You're mistaken, I said firmly. Show me the eviction notice. Windbreaker number 1 stiffened. That's confidential board business. Then show it to the police. I'll wait. They didn't expect pushback. Definitely didn't expect someone who knew how to keep her voice calm while her blood boiled. Eventually, they left, muttering something about trespassing and liability, with plenty of finger-pointing for flair. I thought the nonsense had peaked. I was so wrong. Later that afternoon, just as I was unrolling a mattress on the living room floor and hunting for a box labeled Chargers, they came back. This time with 2 sheriff's deputies and a neighbor wearing a GoPro strapped to his forehead like he was live streaming a war zone. Let me pause here to say something important. Hindsight turns everything into neon signs. But that day, I still believed it was a misunderstanding, bureaucracy, bad record-keeping, a blip in the process. I didn't understand yet. I didn't understand that my uncle had been targeted, that the HOA had seen his illness as an opportunity. That Maple Ridge Summit wasn't a community. It was a scheme dressed up in mulch and mailbox regulations. The deputies were professional, if a little baffled. I handed them my documents, the deed, the probate confirmation, the trust transfer. I even showed them a copy of the state statute that clearly said if your name is on the deed, congratulations, it's your house. They looked at my papers, then at the HOA reps, and then they told everyone to cool off. But of course, things didn't. Stop there. Darlene arrived. Not her real name, obviously. But if you've ever met someone who weaponized a clipboard and a church smile, you know the type. She emerged from a sleek black crossover, heels clacking on gravel like she was trying to stab the earth into submission. Her sunglasses were huge. Her lipstick was an unnatural shade of plum. Her disdain was thick enough to coat the trees. "If you truly inherited this home," she declared, "then you also inherited the previous owner's removal. We don't permit squatters." I almost laughed. "Are you saying my uncle was illegally removed?" For a flicker, a fraction of a second, her expression slipped. Panic. Just a sliver. Then the mask snapped back into place. "You wouldn't understand," she said. "There were legal proceedings." "Perfect," I said. "Hand me copies." The deputy beside us cleared his throat, audibly, deliberately. It was the kind of throat clear that translates to, "Lady, please stop making my day harder." He asked Darlene to provide documentation of the supposed eviction. She said she'd email. It's spoiler alert, she never did. They couldn't remove me by force. So they pivoted. That evening I received an official-looking email from the HOA. A cease and desist notice citing violations of noise ordinances, unauthorized lighting, and an unapproved move-in. Noise? I had a podcast playing on my phone while unpacking. Lighting? I'd turned on the porch light. As for the move-in, no such approval requirement existed in state law. They gave me 24 hours to vacate, or they'd fine me $500 a day and place a lien on the property. Fine. If that was how they wanted to play, then I'd play. Uncle Ray used to forward me HOA horror stories with subject lines like, "You think I'm dramatic? Look at this." So, I had done my homework. I had a folder on my laptop called HOA Martial Arts, and it was about to get its first real-world application. Step 1. Document everything. Trail cam pointed at the gate. Check doorbell camera, battery-powered and mounted by the porch. Checked out notebook with timestamps of every interaction. Check out emails, backups, certified mail, legal citations. You name it. I was ready. I sent a formal response to the HOA requesting legal authority for their claim. I couldn't occupy my own property, all copies of alleged eviction filings, a breakdown of every fine with meeting minutes certified. Copies of the CC&Rs and amendments with signatures. They had 10 business days to comply. What I got back was a butchered PDF with missing page numbers and no signatures. Everything else was privileged. So I sent a certified letter, this time CC'd to the county recorder, the state real estate division, and Julian, a lawyer friend of mine who still owes me for talking him out of buying a timeshare in 2009. While I waited, I unpacked, tried to feel normal, but the house, it hummed with tension. Every drawer I opened reminded me of Ray. Labels like Receipts 2018-2019 and Gloves Not Winter and Twine Do Not Question. He'd been a pack rat, but an organized one. And then, in his office closet, I found it. A box labeled Maple Ridge Nonsense. Inside, emails, certified letters, printed board minutes, and a flash drive labeled HOA Meetings Do Not Delete. Ray had recorded them, illegally, probably, morally, definitely justified. I plugged the drive into my laptop, let it play while I painted the guest room. Around the 50-minute mark, I froze. Perry, the treasurer's voice. If we file the lien, before he dies, it passes with the property. He can't wiggle out of it. Darlene replied, "We have to create a record first. Maybe the landscaping fees." Then someone, laughing, said, "Or we just claim he's evicted. He never leaves the mountain. Who's going to check?" Laughter. Glasses clinking. I dropped the paint roller. Rewound. Listened again. My uncle was dying, and they were plotting. I didn't cry when Ray died. I cried listening to that recording. Not because I was surprised, not entirely, but because hearing them joke about evicting a dying man in their own voices felt like betrayal carved into stone. They weren't just enforcing rules. They were scheming, cruel, calculating, and utterly confident that no one would ever catch them. I sent the audio to Julian that same night. His reply came back in under 10 minutes. "This is conspiracy territory. Chain of custody, baby. Back this up." So I did. Flash drive, cloud, external hard drive, and, yes, even a burned CD labeled in Sharpie like a teenager making a breakup mix. I wasn't just preserving evidence. I was bracing for war. The next morning, I woke up to a new surprise. A drone. It buzzed outside my bedroom window like a giant mechanical wasp, hovering just long enough to feel like a threat. I stumbled to the deck in a sweatshirt, hair wild, heart thudding. It zipped off, sailing over the rooftops. I grabbed Ray's old binoculars, the ones labeled "Birds Only, Don't Be Weird," and followed the drone's path until it landed gracefully on Darlene's deck. Of course, I filmed the landing because documentation is life. That afternoon, things got worse. The water cut off, not just for me. The elderly couple 2 doors down, the Hoppers, lost water too. So did the empty rental next door. But everyone else? Fine. Washing cars, sprinklers running, ice makers humming. I called the county health. Department mountain wells are heavily regulated and shared systems even more so. The inspector came out fast. The HOA's maintenance guy stammered something about a valve. But the logs told a different story. No work order, no scheduled repairs, no emergency notice. They were lying. The inspector ordered immediate restoration and warned of fines if the water wasn't turned back on that day. Spoiler, it was. Later, I learned the HOA tried to bill me a reconnect fee. I paid it, then filed it as evidence. That was the moment I knew I couldn't do this alone. So Julian introduced me to Carrara, an attorney who eats fraudulent HOAs for breakfast and treats property law like a contact sport. We met on a Thursday. Handed her everything. The recordings, the emails, the footage of the drone, the water shut-off. She listened, eyes narrowing into razors. Then she whistled. They recorded themselves admitting to a fraudulent lien scheme. They thought no one was listening. I nodded. She smiled, sharp, gleaming. "We're going to have fun." Her plan was surgical. Step 1. Demand full records from the HOA with statutory deadlines and escalating penalties. Step 2. File a quiet title petition in court, affirming my ownership and freezing any fraudulent lien attempts. Step 3. Report the board's conduct to the Attorney General's Consumer Division, the Real Estate Oversight Board, and, if we found evidence, the IRS. And Step 4. Offer them an out. Quiet resignations, reimbursements, and an audit in exchange for not dragging each board member into personal liability court. We wouldn't start with the hammer, but we'd bring it just in case. Their response. Threats. A Word doc attachment. Sloppy formatting, unnumbered paragraphs, claiming Uncle Ray had been delinquent 3 quarters in a row. I pulled up his receipts. He paid every quarter. Sometimes early. One even had Darlene's signature scrawled across it. Received. I scanned it, filed it. Meanwhile, the neighborhood was shifting. Some neighbors, like the Hoppers, brought over casseroles and whispered, "We've been waiting," for someone to stand up to them. Others peeked from behind curtains. One guy, Alan, offered to build me a 6-foot fence, just to see them argue the height. Kiri, who cornered me at the mail shed, warned me, "They'll start fining you for anything. My cousin got a letter for leaving her trash can out for 2 hours. She wasn't exaggerating. I got a notice taped to my door with actual tape, no envelope, claiming I owed $1,200 for unapproved exterior color changes. I had painted the guest room. Inside, interior paint. They were fining me for painting an interior wall. I scanned the letter, sent it to Carrara with the subject line, "Apparently, my walls are community property now." Her reply, "Great, pattern of arbitrary enforcement." And the pattern kept growing. One morning, 2 deputies returned. Not for me, for the board. Someone had called in an anonymous complaint about a dangerous dog on my porch. I don't have a dog, but I do have a motion-activated speaker that barks when someone steps on the top stair, part of Ray's legacy of delightful paranoia. The officer listened, heard nothing, shrugged, left. The next day, I got an official violation notice, harboring a dangerous animal, with a screenshot from my own doorbell camera. They'd hacked it. They had to have connected to my Wi-Fi back when I hadn't changed the default password. That creeped me out more than anything else. So I locked it down, WPA3 encryption, new SSID, isolated VLAN. I even printed out a section of the Digital Privacy Act that makes unauthorized camera access a crime and tacked it to the HOA bulletin board with a neon sticky note, "Whoever streamed my porch, this is a felony." Let me switch gears, because 2 months before Ray passed, he told me something strange. "If something happens to me, check the blue envelope behind the freezer. Don't open it unless you have to." I had found it the week after he died. Inside, a list of numbers, a tiny brass key, and a note. "If they try to take the house, call Dennis at Mountain Title." So I did. Dennis remembered Ray. He said there might be shenanigans, so I placed a hold instruction. What kind of hold? Any transfer of the property would require a notarized affidavit from the owner. Didn't stop a lien, but it slowed down a sale. And that's how I found out the board had tried to place a lien 3 separate times, November, January, and the i.e. week after Ray died, and failed each time because of that hold. The county clerk flagged it. Notices went to Ray's address and the HOA. They tried to sneak it through. They got caught, and they kept trying. It wasn't just civil, it was potentially criminal. We requested the county's lien ledger. They handed it over with a smile. Day 15. In the house, I called the police, my first time as complainant. Caught Perry, the treasurer, in my backyard at midnight with bolt cutters. He claimed he was inspecting for fire hazards. The deputy wasn't impressed. Issued a formal trespass warning. Next day, I got a violation, blocking emergency egress. Apparently by locking the side gate, a gate that opened onto a ravine. They claimed it was part of a common maintenance path, and that the HOA had 24/7 access. I checked the plat map. There was a utility easement, 5 feet wide, for underground access only. So I posted a sign. Utility access requires 24-hour notice. Trespassers will be reported. We filed the quiet title action. Filed for a temporary restraining order to stop all fines and liens until the hearing. The judge granted it. Ex parte, the board's power, frozen. You'd think they'd regroup, but no. They escalated. The next HOA newsletter accused me of spreading disharmony. Someone put a flyer in my mailbox, illegal, with a photoshopped image of me holding a sign that said, "Down with Community." It looked like a high school graphic design project. What they didn't realize? Metadata exists. Alan, who turns out to be a digital forensics hobbyist, traced it. The image originated from Perry's work computer. We added it to the file. Then the phone rang. State investigator. We've received multiple complaints about Maple Ridge Summit. Are you willing to provide evidence? I laughed. Would you like it alphabetized? They asked for audio, board minutes, financial records. I didn't have the books yet, but we had subpoenaed them. The treasurer stalled. The judge gave them 5 days. What they produced: a financial disaster, consulting fees to Darlene's cousin, cash deposits that looked suspiciously like short-term rentals, banned by the CCNRs, withdrawals labeled special projects. No receipts. One entry: $2,500 to a Shell LLC tied to Perry's girlfriend. We gift-wrapped that for the state. But I didn't stop there, because while I was fighting to prove my right to live in my own home, the Hopper's roof started leaking and the HOA denied their request for emergency funds. No reason, just funds are low. Meanwhile, Perry got new patio furniture delivered. The clubhouse got a $3,000 espresso machine, so I got to work. Church charity, crowdsourcing, sympathetic neighbors. We got the Hoppers a new roof. The HOA fined them for an unauthorized alteration, and that's when I went nuclear. I didn't scream. I didn't threaten. I just wrote an email. Simple, factual, bulletproof. Subject: timeline of denial. The Hoppers, the HOA, and a $3,000 espresso machine. Body: the Hoppers have lived here 17 years. They bake for the potlucks, quilt for the hospital, and never missed a single dues payment. Their roof failed during a storm. They requested emergency maintenance funds and were denied. That same week, the HOA installed a luxury espresso machine at the clubhouse. Attachment 1. The donation receipt for the Hoppers' new roof. Attachment 2, the espresso machine invoice. Attachment 3, every line of the CCNRs requiring the board to prioritize safety-related expenditures. Sent it to the full HOA board. To the neighborhood list Darlene once accidentally CC'd me on, and to the county official who logged HOA compliance reports. Then I sat back and waited. Within 20 minutes, the replies started rolling in. Not from the board, from the people. Neighbors who had been silent suddenly found their keyboards. Reply all, paragraphs, fury, sadness, gratitude. It was like striking a match in a dry forest. All that passive fear, gone. All that whispered frustration, loud now. We weren't just homeowners anymore. We were witnesses. We were fed up, and some of us were damn well armed with documentation. The next morning, I found Kiri on my porch with her laptop and a box of donuts. She said, "Let's sort this." Turns out Kiri wasn't just a gossipy neighbor with good instincts. She was a paralegal, and she was ready for war. We sat at my kitchen table for 5 hours that day. Sorting, labeling, indexing. She turned my chaos into case law, every violation. Every receipt, every creepy flyer and hacked screenshot, color-coded tabs, chronological folders, a binder just for drone footage. It stopped feeling like survival, started feeling like strategy. Meanwhile, the judge granted our motion for a quiet title hearing and a temporary restraining order. The HOA was legally barred from collecting any fines or penalties until the hearing. Their game paused. so they changed tactics again. Friday afternoon, a certified letter arrived from the HOA attorney. They were scheduling a disciplinary hearing for me, for conduct unbecoming a member. What did that even mean? They cited harassment, defamation, and creating a hostile environment. No matter that I had a restraining order barring them from enforcement, no matter that this wasn't kindergarten and being mean wasn't illegal. They wanted to scare me. I didn't flinch. Because I knew something they didn't. They were already under investigation, and they didn't even know how deep it went. We had filed complaints with the state attorney general, the real estate division, the IRS tip line, and, quietly, the Hopper's granddaughter, Elise, was a journalist, with a press badge, and a growing stack of interview notes, so I did what Ray would have done. I set the cameras to motion-sensitive recording. I restocked the ink in my printer, and I waited. Then came the flyer, taped to the community bulletin board outside the clubhouse. Special. Meeting to remove board members. Petition threshold achieved. 27 signatures. More than half the neighborhood. I didn't start it. The Hoppers did, along with Kiri and Alan, whose woodworking business had been cited 3 times in 2 months for parking violations, while Darlene's friend ran an unlicensed salon out of her garage. The flyer was bold, legal, within HOA rules. The response, immediate. Darlene posted a counter flyer claiming the petition was invalid. Only homeowners in good standing could vote, which meant, conveniently, anyone the board had fined for nonsense was disqualified. I saw 3 people rip that flyer down within the hour, and then, the night before the meeting, they locked the community center, claimed a plumbing emergency. We weren't surprised. We met on my deck instead. 50 people. Folded chairs borrowed from every porch in the neighborhood. A mic. A Bluetooth speaker. Kiri reading aloud from the real, unedited CCNRs someone had anonymously slipped under my door. Quorum achieved. Motion to remove, seconded. Secret ballot, handwritten index cards, and a locked shoebox. The vote? Majority to remove. Darlene and Perry. 2 other board members resigned in protest, and Cora, the one who'd quietly stepped away weeks earlier, stood in the back and clapped softly when it was done. We elected an interim board. Kiri, Alan, Mr. Hopper, and 2 others with reputations for fairness. Their first action? Hire a licensed community manager to oversee compliance and ensure every future meeting followed actual law. The next morning, we hand-delivered the new officer filings to the county. The old board filed an objection, but the new board had majority vote, legal quorum, and documentation. We weren't scared anymore. The court scheduled a hearing to validate the change in leadership. And that's when the fallout hit. Darlene sent threatening emails to half the community. Perry vanished for a week. The IRS sent a letter acknowledging receipt of financial irregularity complaints. The state investigator scheduled interviews with 5 residents, and Elise knocked on my door with a camera bag and a calm smile. "Can I record?" she asked. I said yes. On one condition, she blur the house number. The story aired on a Tuesday night. Mountain HOA accused of fraud and harassment was the headline. They interviewed the Hoppers. Mr. Hopper said, "We just want to live in peace and fix our roof." It was quiet, honest, devastating. People we'd never even met started sending support. 3 more homeowners came forward with stories of fines for garden gnomes and unapproved bird feeders. The pattern grew. The Attorney General's office issued a preservation order, All documents, all emails, all files. Destruction is a crime. That Thursday, Perry's woodworking shop got a surprise visit from the state tax board. Seems someone hadn't been charging sales tax on custom orders. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe when you build your kingdom on fraud, the foundation starts to crack. But I still had to live there. Had to restain the deck, cook dinner, water the succulents Ray left behind. Life didn't stop just because the court case was building. I found Ray's old hunting jacket in the closet with $340 tucked in the pocket, logged it, deposited it. I wasn't giving them an inch of ammo, and sometimes I cried. Not out of weakness, but out of all the things that sneak up in the quiet. Grief, exhaustion, anger that something so pure, a gift from a dying uncle, had turned into a battlefield. One evening I stood on the deck as the sun dipped over the ridge line, tea in hand, when my phone buzzed. Carrara. Settlement offer in? You'll like it. The old board, through council, offered to resign, reimburse my $8,432.19 in documented costs, repay the Hoppers roof fund, submit to a third-party audit. They wanted my personal claims dropped, no confidentiality clause. I told Carrara we'd take it, only if the state didn't object, and only if we could keep the fraud claims against the corporate entity so the judge could order mandatory oversight. The AG didn't block it. We signed. The judge approved. And just like that, the dam broke. The audit revealed $30,000 in miscellaneous maintenance with no receipts. A $2,500 consultant retainer to a Shell LLC linked to Perry's girlfriend. Cash deposits that didn't line up with member dues. We gift-wrapped it for the AG's office. They issued a consent decree, mandatory annual training, full financial transparency, and disciplinary actions pending. Darlene listed her house. Perry disappeared, and for the first time since I turned the key in that front door, I slept through the night. I should have known the peace wouldn't last. It was 2:08 a.m. when my phone buzzed. Doorbell alert. I rubbed my eyes, checked the screen, and there it was. A shadow figure darting across the porch, reaching for the doorknob, then vanishing into the dark when the floodlight flared on. I watched the clip 5 times, slowed it down, enhanced it. Nothing useful. Just a shape in motion and the sound of retreating feet. The next morning, a note was pinned to the side gate. Leave while you can. No signature, just fear scribbled in permanent marker. I filed a police report, because patterns matter, and this wasn't vandalism. It was escalation, but I didn't break. I got sharper. Carrara drafted a civil complaint against the former board for fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and civil conspiracy. We gave them one last chance. A settlement offer. Clean exit, reimbursements, no gag order, full cooperation with the audit. They declined, with a smug letter warning we'd be laughed out of court. Fine, let them laugh, because we weren't alone anymore. The IRS had formally opened a review. The Attorney General's Consumer Protection Office had launched an oversight case. Elise, the reporter, had secured a second interview slot, and this time more neighbors were willing to go on record. Meanwhile, I focused on one thing: keep receipts. Literal ones, legal ones, emotional ones. Because in war, especially quiet, HOA war, paper matters more than shouting ever could. Ray's legacy wasn't just the house. It was the ammo can buried in the back garden. I found it while weeding near the deck stairs, half rusted, wedged under a stone. Inside, his survival kit. Duct tape, a roll of quarters, backup keys, and a note in his handwriting. If you find this, you're probably doing yard work. Good. Keep going. I sat there in the dirt and laughed, then cried, and kept going. We held our first official interim board meeting in the open. No locked doors, no coffee bar barriers, just folding chairs, clipboards, and a battered speaker system Alan rigged together. Neighbors came. Kids came. Even the hoppers brought cookies. It felt like a town again. Kiri brought out the whiteboard she made from the back of an old mirror. Promises they made. She listed every one of the board's unkept commitments: pothole repairs, transparency and budgeting, updated wildfire planning, fixing the swing set in the small park. We added dates, assignments, smile stickers for completed tasks. Petty? Maybe. But petty with purpose. The day before our next court hearing, something unexpected happened. A silver sedan pulled up outside the house and parked at the edge of the driveway, engine running, windows tinted. I stayed on the porch. The man who stepped out wore a suit that had seen better days and held a manila folder like it was radioactive. "Are you the niece of Raymond D?" "Yes." "I'm Brent. I represent an interested heir." I didn't blink. "Talia." He nodded. Talia, Ray's distant niece, had once borrowed $3,000 from him and never paid it back. The same Talia who hadn't called once during his illness. The same one who now apparently believed she had a claim to the property. "Your client is asserting a lack of testamentary capacity?" I asked. Brent cleared his throat. "She believes Mr. D may have been unduly influenced at the time of the trust transfer." I smiled. A thin, cold smile. "Would you like to watch a video?" Because Ray, in all his paranoid brilliance, had recorded one. A digital affidavit. Time-stamped, notarized, with him reading his own trust transfer aloud, name by name, section by section, with an explanation of his choices. "If you're watching this because someone's arguing," Ray said on screen, "shut it down. She's the only one who ever showed up when it rained." Brent folded at mediation, fire out, but it was just a warning shot. The deeper the audit dug, the messier the past got. The HOA books, now under forensic review by the new board's accountant, Mina revealed almost $30,000 labeled as special projects without any attached invoices. One expense stood out, $12,500 paid to a consulting firm. Only it wasn't a firm. It was a shell LLC tied to Perry's girlfriend, and the payments had been recurring. Meanwhile, the water tanks that supplied the Plateau's homes had been flagged as non-compliant with emergency readiness standards, the same standards the old board was supposed to have updated 2 years ago. They hadn't. They'd spent the money elsewhere. We submitted everything: invoices, bank records, emails, receipts that didn't match events, and one particularly bold email from Darlene that read, "Let's just say it was used for outreach and keep the receipts vague." That line made it into the AG's summary report. By the time wildfire season arrived, the state had issued a full compliance order for the HOA, binding, enforceable, and subject to inspection. That meant inspections of everything, including Perry's previously unregistered short-term rental listings. He vanished again, this time for longer. We replaced the swing set, cleared brush from the fire road, set up a neighborhood chain for emergency alerts, and Boone, the fire captain volunteer, gave us an A- in the new fire drill. The minus? Perry's lumber pile, the one he'd promised to move 5 years ago, still sitting near the emergency egress gate. We moved it ourselves. Catharsis. But the story wasn't over, because Darlene tried one last maneuver. She filed a motion to void the special meeting where she'd been voted out, claiming procedural errors and member ineligibility. The judge reviewed the file. He denied her motion without a hearing. Kiri printed the order and taped it to the inside door of the community clubhouse bathroom stall. Petty? Perfect. The AG's office followed up with a consent decree, mandatory annual ethics training for all board members, ongoing financial transparency, and quarterly reporting to the Oversight Division for the next 2 years. The HOA's espresso machine sold for $450 on a neighborhood auction site. That money helped fund a new storm drain system near the cul-de-sac. We were finally spending like a community, not like a cartel. I planted lavender under the mailbox, painted the porch swing, tuned Ray's old mandolin, and taught myself 3 chords on YouTube. One afternoon, Rowan, a wildlife biologist I nearly ran over on the fire road, came by to help identify a screech owl outside the deck. He stayed for tea. We talked about pond algae and bird feeder bans, and how his last girlfriend tried to make him choose between field work and love. He chose the field work. Good call. We planted natives by the pond the next weekend. Turns out Perry's girlfriend's landscaping contracts had installed invasive ornamentals in 7 lots. We pulled them out like weeds, literal and metaphorical. Neighbors started laughing again. We held a barbecue without permits and no one tattled. Kids chalked the sidewalks, and Kiri, always organized, handed out laminated HOA rights pamphlets to newcomers with a smile and a loaf of hopper bread. The damage had been real, but so was the rebuild. I still checked the cameras every night, not for trespassers now, but for bears, because in the mountains there's always one kind of beast or another. Ray's promises list, the one I found in the Maple Ridge nonsense box, hung beside the door now. On a whiteboard, framed in wood that Alan milled himself. Promises kept. Promises pending. Check marks growing. Smiley stickers multiplying. And a photo of Ray, standing on the porch, a coffee mug in one hand and that sly, "I told you so" smile on his face. He would have loved the ending, not the dying, but the part where petty tyrants were tossed out by stubborn neighbors with clipboards. The story wasn't perfect, but it was finally ours. They thought it would fade, that the adrenaline would wear off, the neighbors would forget, and I'd get tired. But they underestimated something important. I don't tire. Not when the cause is just. Not when I'm defending a gift from a man who taught me how to change a tire, how to read a plat map, and how to leave a paper trail so tight it could choke a liar. The court ruled in our favor, officially. Quiet title granted. The property was legally and publicly mine. All past HOA claims, the fines, the violations, the threats, nullified. The court even tacked on a formal warning. Any attempt to interfere with my occupancy would be treated as contempt. I printed that order, framed it, hung it in Ray's office under his old Trust But Verify poster. Still, it didn't feel over. Not until the final rot surfaced. Mina, the spreadsheet sorceress on our new board, was knee-deep in forensic accounting when she hit. Something strange. Duplicate line items, not just sloppy, intentional. Amounts entered twice in different sections, once as equipment rental, once as special services. The vendor? An LLC owned by a man named Brett R., a cousin of Darlene's husband. The payments totaled $7,800 over 6 months. No contract, no receipts. Just approved in board minutes by Perry. We filed it. With the court. With the AG. With the state tax board. That triggered a subpoena, and in return, the board received a letter. Destruction of records is a felony. Preserve everything. The old board members started disappearing. One moved out in the night, another deactivated all social accounts. Perry's woodworking shop closed for renovation. It never reopened. Darlene stayed just long enough to try. One last power play. She filed a civil suit. Defamation. Against me, personally. She alleged that my emails, public statements, and cooperation with the press had damaged her standing in the community and made it impossible to sell her home without stigma. She wanted damages and silence. She got neither. We countered with a motion to dismiss under anti-SLAPP laws, designed to protect people from lawsuits meant to chill public participation. The judge didn't just grant the motion, he ordered her to pay my legal fees. And he did it with a tone that barely concealed his irritation. This court, he said, will not be weaponized to punish a homeowner for reporting misconduct. It should have felt like victory, but victory is quieter than you think. There's no parade, no music, just a slow exhale, a tension in the shoulders that finally releases. That night I stood on the porch with tea and the mandolin, picking out the 3 chords I knew, and tried to remember what it was like to move here full of hope. I remembered Ray's laugh echoing off the deck. I remembered how his slippers were still in the hallway when I first arrived. I remembered being afraid to breathe, too loud like grief might break if I touched it. Now, the silence was different. It didn't feel like absence. It felt like space, room to rebuild, room to live. Neighbors began to fill the vacuum. Kiri led a committee to revamp the HOA bylaws. Alan redrew the landscaping guidelines to actually make sense. Native plants encouraged, not fined. The Hoppers hosted a community bonfire with hot cider and homemade bread. No agenda, no flyers, just humans, breathing easier. Rowan came by again, this time with a book on mountain ecology and a shy smile that made me blush like I was 16. We cleared out the last invasive shrubs, planted sunflowers, let the deer figure it out for themselves. Then something happened that shook the past loose one more time. Mrs. Hopper, while helping clear out a storage shed near the clubhouse, found a dusty metal lockbox. It had a paper tag taped to the front. Pool Fund, 2017. Inside, old receipts, checks, a folded court document, a lawsuit filed by a former homeowner. After $12,000 in designated pool repair funds vanished. The HOA had quietly settled, promised tighter financial controls, then replaced the treasurer and sealed the story like a time capsule. It never made the newsletter, never reached the minutes. But now it was back, and it confirmed the pattern. Misuse. Silence. Cover-up. We scanned the documents, added them to the AG's case. It strengthened our position, validated the audit, and gave us something we didn't even realize we needed. Proof that this wasn't new, that the rot had roots. Sarah, our attorney, used it to bolster the remaining claim against the HOA as a corporate entity, the one part of our settlement we hadn't dropped. The court agreed to hear it. Judge would rule on long-term oversight, and that ruling would echo far beyond Maple Ridge Summit. Because bad HOAs aren't rare. They're just quiet, until someone refuses to be. Around that time, a letter arrived. Stamped, official, the IRS. They were requesting 5 years of 1099s and financial disclosures from the old board. None existed. Mina, ever the wizard, gathered everything we had, filed for abatement on penalties, and argued for restitution without criminal charges. As long as the funds were recovered and the new board committed to ongoing education. She mostly won. Darlene's name appeared on the IRS's contractor list. Perry's LLC got flagged. The tax board opened inquiries, and suddenly the people who tried to bully me out with clipboards and cease and desist letters were learning about consequences. Meanwhile, our neighborhood blossomed. We patched potholes, replaced the creepy swing set with a beautiful new structure donated by a neighbor who owned a hardware franchise, installed a community bulletin board that actually worked. Someone, no one ever confessed, painted a mural on the back of the clubhouse, a mountain silhouette, kids playing, and in white cursive beneath it, neighbors, not subjects. Ray would have loved it. Probably would have added a speech bubble and a joke about squirrels running the place better than Darlene ever did. The Hoppers finally took a vacation, first in 8 years. We pooled money for a cat sitter. Alan fixed their gate. Kiri planted flowers in their yard. When they came back, Mrs. Hopper cried, and I cried with her, because this, all of this, was what I thought I was moving into when I first arrived. Not the paranoia, not the citations, not the GoPros and drones and fake eviction notices, but people who cared, people who show up. I check the cameras now, but only for bears. The drone attacks stopped after Perry sold his house. We found one last model in his attic, a high-end surveillance drone with a dead battery and a memory card full of footage. We turned it over to the investigator. Let the agencies deal with what came next, because we were tired, but we weren't done. We were changed, and we were watching. Sometimes victory looks like silence. No threats, no letters, no strangers filming your porch. Just quiet mornings and the sound of a kettle boiling, but silence doesn't mean the storm is over. It means you're in the eye of it. We were waiting for the judge's ruling on corporate oversight, the one final thread left from our war with the old board. The stakes were high. If we won, the HOA would be placed under mandated third-party management for 2 years. If we lost, we'd be left to police the ruins ourselves. So we waited. But waiting didn't mean standing still. Kiri organized our first real community work day. No votes, no forms, just folks in gloves and sun hats tackling the overgrown lot behind the clubhouse. Boone chopped firewood. Alan brought his power washer. The Hoppers made sandwiches. And I brought out Ray's old speaker, played Fleetwood Mac from a playlist labeled "Don't Mock My Taste." Nobody mocked it. A few even danced. That afternoon, as the cleanup wrapped, Mrs. Hopper tapped my arm. "You're strong, you know," she said, "but even strong things need rest." I nodded, trying not to cry. She was right. It wasn't just the HOA fight that had worn me down. It was grief, too. Quiet, patient grief that didn't ask for permission before showing up in waves. Ray had built this house. Ray had trusted me to protect it. And some days the weight of that was almost too much to carry. But then I'd find a note in one of his drawers, or a list labeled "rainy day things to fix," or a label on a dusty shoebox that said, "This is not junk, I promise." Inside one of those boxes, I found it. A faded folder marked "Drainage Project, Confidential." Tucked between water bills and topo maps was a single signed agreement, an easement unfiled. It was dated 3 years ago and granted access from the community septic system to a private parcel of land downhill, land owned by a company named Lornfield Holdings. Looked it up. The LLC was registered under an address that matched Perry's workshop. The document wasn't part of HOA records. It hadn't been disclosed to members. and it authorized significant grading and infrastructure work. Without a vote. My heart kicked up a beat. Why? Why would the board sign a hidden agreement benefiting private land? I brought it to Kiri. She read it twice, face going still. This was never filed with the county, she said. But it's binding. We checked the area maps. Lornfield's parcel sat just below a section of slope that had suffered minor erosion during the last storm season. Erosion the old board had cited when creating a disaster fund. They collected $10,000 in assessments. None of the money was ever spent on slope repair, because there was no slope repair. But this agreement? It proved they had used that money to prep the lower parcel for development access. Private development. Likely a rental cabin or an Airbnb cluster. That wasn't just unethical. It could be criminal misappropriation of funds. We added it to the file, sent it to the AG, and sat on the porch with mugs of cocoa as the mountain wind rolled through the trees. This was Ray's final breadcrumb, I whispered. Kiri nodded. And they never thought you'd find it. The next day, the new board called a special meeting, not for a vote. Not for drama, just to share what we'd learned. We opened the floor to questions. People listened, asked smart things, took notes. One woman, a newcomer named Jasmine, raised her hand at the end and said, "This isn't just about rules, is it?" "No," I said. "It's about trust." "And repair," Kiri added. "Which takes longer than damage." Next week, the judge issued his decision. He read the evidence, reviewed the audit, listened to the audio clip of Perry joking about liens passing with the property. Then he ruled. State-mandated oversight for 24 months. An independent community manager, hired by the HOA, but approved by the court. Full transparency, quarterly audits, mandatory member participation in budget votes. We had won, and not just for us. We were told that our case, our stubborn, painfully documented, unpaid grassroots case, would be used as a model for future HOA reform efforts in the state. All those years they tried to silence Ray, all the files they thought would rot in a box, every one of them mattered. The espresso machine? Gone. The fake drone footage violations? Dismissed. The hacked doorbell cam screenshots? Archived in the complaint appendix. And the woman who once called me a squatter with an attitude now avoided eye contact at the mailbox. Fine. I didn't. Need her apology. I had the deed. I had the judgment. And I had a porch light that broke no rule when I turned it on at night. That winter, we faced the first real storm since the cleanup. Wind snapped the old flagpole at the entrance. Snow piled over the generator enclosure. The pipes in 3 homes froze, including mine. Neighbors rallied. One brought firewood, another brought dry. Towels Rowan, bless him, showed up with a toolbox and fixed the insulation line like he'd done it 100 times. Later that week, I found a note from him tucked under my front door. "If this house is a fortress, you've made it warm. Let me know if you want company next time it storms." I smiled. Sometimes healing sneaks in when you're not looking, even while you're still patching holes. By spring, the pond was blooming. We planted wildflowers around the mailbox cluster. The hoppers took a second vacation. I made a laminated copy of the quiet title order and put it on the inside of my pantry door, next to Ray's survival kit note and a picture of us fixing the deck railing in 2019. "Get a permit next time," his caption said. Now we do, for everything, because we've read the rules now, and we know them better than the people who wrote them. It happened quietly, not with handcuffs, not with breaking news, just a single certified envelope arriving at the HOA's new P.O. box. Return address, Office of the State Attorney General. Inside was a consent decree. Final signed, enforced. We read it out loud in the clubhouse like it was scripture. Mandatory oversight confirmed for 2 full years. Annual board training required by law. Records preservation under audit clause. Restitution for funds misused. And one sentence that made the room fall into a stunned silence. Future board members found in violation will be held individually liable for fiduciary misconduct. No more hiding behind the shield of the HOA. No more claiming we didn't know. No more slush funds for espresso machines and fake consulting. It was the closest thing to justice we were ever going to get, and it was enough, mostly. But Maple Ridge Summit still had ghosts. One of them showed up in a khaki coat and sunglasses one Saturday afternoon, knocking gently on my front door. She introduced herself as Lena, sister of a former board member, not Perry, not Darlene, the 5th one, the quiet one. The one who resigned early on and never returned my emails. He didn't know what they were doing, she said. Not at first. I said nothing. She looked at the porch swing, at the painted trim, at the lavender I'd planted beneath the window boxes. My brother died last month. Cancer. It was fast. My breath caught. He left a folder labeled, "Make this right." She held it out. Thin. Black. Worn on the edges. Inside were meeting notes. Not the typed kind. Handwritten pages, line by line, in clean cursive. A name showed up again and again. Tanner Development Group, a private company that had once pitched a commercial expansion near the Fire Road, a proposal the HOA had denied. In 2016, then again in 2018. Except according to these notes in 2021, a vote passed. A secret vote. Just 3 board members present. 2 signed, 1 abstained. The abstainer, her brother, and he'd kept the draft agreement. It gave Tanner Development a non-public right-of-way through HOA-maintained land. I stared at the document, at the signatures, at the timeline. That explained the weird grading on the back trail. The sudden appearance of survey flags. The disaster fund that never went to disaster prevention. It had all been about access, a deal cut in silence. Profits, traded for secrecy. I looked at Lena. Why now? I asked. Because he couldn't live with it. And because your uncle tried to stop it. My heart sank. You mean they went after him because of this? She nodded. Ray found out, wrote to the county, tried to block the easement from being filed. That's when the board turned on him. That's when they started stacking violations. He wouldn't back down. She set the folder on the table and left. I stood in my living room, hands shaking, as the final thread slipped into place. Ray hadn't just been stubborn, he'd been right, and they tried to erase him for it. We brought the folder to the attorney general's office the next business day. It confirmed what we suspected. The board had knowingly authorized development access through community land and hidden it from the membership. That single document meant their liability wasn't just past tense, it was active. The AG launched a second investigation, and the county froze the Tanner development permits pending review. We never saw the bulldozers, because they never came back. That night, I lit a candle for Ray, set it on the deck railing, let it flicker beneath the stars while the mountains held their silence, like a secret finally kept. The next morning, the community gathered. No emergency. No scandal. Just people. Neighbors. Friends. We met in the park. Someone brought coffee. Someone else brought a guitar. I read a letter out loud. It was Ray's, dated 2 years before he passed. written like he knew one day it would need to be read. This neighborhood isn't broken. It's just tired. And tired people sometimes give power to the loudest voice instead of the wisest one. If you're reading this, don't be loud. Be clear. Be fair. Be stubborn if you must, but never stop showing up. That's how the roots grow back. People cried. Even Alan. Carrie gave me a quiet hug and whispered, "You did it." I whispered back, "We all did." Later, we gathered the last of the petition flyers, violation notices, and slanderous mailers and burned them in a fire pit. Not to destroy evidence. We had digital copies. We burned them because ritual matters. Sometimes you need a flame to mark the end of something. Sometimes justice isn't cold. It's warm. That summer, we published the first honest annual report in a decade. Mina broke it down line by line, even the boring parts. The surplus rolled into road repairs. The discretionary fund used to subsidize snowplow access for our elderly neighbors. The clubhouse painted, ventilated, repurposed into a weekly market and meeting space. We even added shelves, one for neighborhood tools, one for books, one for Ray's Maple Ridge Nonsense Archive, digitized, redacted where needed, and open to view. Learn from us, the plaque says, or end up like them. The new board took no salaries. Kiri led a committee to set term limits. We held a vote for the first official board election under new rules. No campaigning allowed. Just bios. Just honesty. Alan won a seat. So did Mrs. Hopper. The woman who once baked bread in silence now held the gavel and smiled like someone who had no more patience for nonsense. They swore their oaths with real witnesses. We clapped and moved on. The lawsuits faded. The threats stopped. The cameras stayed, but only for the bears. I still keep Ray's note above my desk. If you find this, it means you cared enough to look. People still ask me what the moral is. Why I stayed. Why I fought. Why I didn't just walk away when they made it unbearable. I don't always have a perfect answer. But I know this. A deed is ownership, but a voice is possession. And when someone tells, you don't belong here, that's when you dig your heels in and whisper, "Watch me." The day the new welcome packets arrived, I stood in the community center watching as Kiri placed them in their cubbies, one for each home, wrapped in string, printed on good paper. Inside, the updated CCNRs, a laminated map, a magnet with the new emergency contact chain, and a coupon for a loaf of Mrs. Hopper's bread. There was also a letter, not legal, not formal, just personal. Welcome to Maple Ridge Summit. This community has been through a lot, but what matters most now isn't what happened. It's who we choose to be next. Please come by and say hello. We'll be on the deck. It was signed, the neighbors who stayed, not the board. Not management, neighbors. That was the point. We stopped acting like we were part of some gated kingdom with rules that changed depending on who you were. We remembered that an HOA isn't a monarchy. It's a contract, one we all sign, and one we can rewrite, and we did. I still live in the house Ray left me. I still walk the same driveway that those windbreakers screeched up the day they told me I didn't belong. But now, the gravel crunches differently under my boots. It sounds like home. We cleared the final brush pile from the slope last week, the one Perry said he'd get to next season and never did. We found 2 rusted garden gnomes buried beneath it. Someone cleaned them off and set them near the pond. They wear tiny signs now. Protected species. Neighbors joke about them. It's good. Laughter is a kind of justice, too. Darlene? She tried to reinvent herself in another HOA 2 towns over. Didn't last. Turns out when your name is attached to an AG decree and a court order, it tends to show. Up on Google. Perry? He's a rumor now. A ghost behind a locked workshop and a revoked license. We didn't chase him. We didn't need to. We let the facts walk him out the door, because that's what truth does. Eventually. Rowan and I are still figuring it out. He's out on fire roads most weeks, cataloging owl nests and erosion patterns. Sometimes he comes back covered in burrs and bee stings. And sometimes he brings coffee and wildflowers. We don't label it. We just keep showing up. And showing up is enough. On the 1-year anniversary of the quiet title ruling, we held a block party. Nothing fancy. Just borrowed tables, plastic forks, and too many pasta salads. I brought out Ray's mandolin. I still only know 5 chords, but that night, they were enough. We set up a photo board, old snapshots, news clippings, a copy of the AG's order with sticky notes that said things like Receipt Queen and Allen's Victory Lap. Someone had blown up the quote from Ray's letter, "Don't be loud, be clear." Underneath it, someone else had scribbled in marker, also, "Be really, really stubborn." We toasted to that. A few weeks later, a young couple moved into the tan house on the corner, the one that sat empty for years because the board wouldn't approve any rental signs. They showed up with a cat named Butterscotch and a baby that wouldn't stop smiling. The first thing we gave them wasn't a citation. It was a loaf of bread, a toolbox, and the new neighborhood binder. I handed it over and smiled. This is everything they used to hide. And everything we fixed. The woman held it like it was sacred. Her husband asked if we had advice. I said, "Keep your receipts and your porch light on." They laughed. But I meant it. Because in a world of fine print and hidden agendas, sometimes the most radical thing you can do is live openly. Document everything, and refuse to be afraid. I keep Ray's documents in a fireproof safe now, but I leave one taped inside the kitchen cabinet, the quiet title judgment. Just a piece of paper, yellowing slightly at the edges, but when I open the cabinet for tea, it's always there. Proof. I was right to stay, right to fight, right to say, "This is mine." Every now and then, I'll walk the trail behind the house, the one where they tried to sneak through development permits and fake utility claims. I bring my phone. I take pictures. I mark changes. Not because I'm paranoid anymore, but because that vigilance. That's how we protect each other. That's how we honor the people who didn't live to see the gnomes get their signs and the espresso machine get sold for parts. One day, maybe I'll take Ray's ashes up there. Let the wind take them. But for now, I keep a little bit of him in the garden, near the lavender, beside the ammo can where I found his note. If you find this, you're probably doing yard work. Good. Keep going. So I do. Keep going. Keep checking cameras. Keep teaching neighbors how to read bylaws before signing anything. Keep sending emails to the county when something doesn't smell right. Keep offering tea and a charger and a place to cry when someone gets their first fine for something absurd. But mostly, I just live. In the house they said I wasn't allowed to have, on the land they tried to take, under a porch light that used to be illegal, but now just lights the way home. They told me I was trespassing. They called me a squatter. They threatened me, fined me, stalked me, hacked my doorbell camera, and forged an eviction that never existed. And they lost, because I had the deed. I had the truth. and I had every single word Ray ever wrote down in that box, labeled Maple Ridge Nonsense. The nonsense is gone now. What's left is ours. The board. Meetings are about wildfire drills and garden swaps now. No one raises their voice. People ask real questions and get real answers. Sometimes we still argue, but it's the kind of arguing you can recover from. The kind that means you care. And when I lock the door at night, it clicks like punctuation. The end of a sentence that used to read, "You don't belong here." Now, it says, "Watch me thrive." So if you're out there, sitting on your own porch, with your own violation notice taped to your door, wondering if you're crazy for wanting peace and fairness and the simple right to exist without permission, you're not crazy. You're just early. Keep going. And if you ever need help, we're on the deck. Bring your folder. We've got room at the table and a toaster oven. Because around here, the bread is always fresh. And the door stays open.